Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
We have talked before about how long and exhausting a path it is for refugees coming to the U.S., leaving their home country in a potential life or death situation, to then being stuck for however long in a holding country, all to arrive in some place like the U.S. and maybe Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where it is a whole new world, new language, new food, new culture. It is overwhelming. And that was before this January, when Trump paused the visa process for people from 75 countries. That matters because it basically left a lot of refugees who already live here, mainly from Africa, Asia, and Latin American countries, without a clear path to citizenship, just kind of stuck. It also caused a lot of confusion for companies who employ refugees. Since work authorizations were also paused, people didn't know what was and what wasn't legal. So a lot of refugees, already overwhelmed, were fired from their jobs. These companies didn't know refugees are allowed to work in the U.S. even without these documents. This is Status Pending from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, and I'm Jimmy Gutierrez. I spoke with Caitlin Lewis and Bibi Noor Mohammed from Milwaukee's Community Center for Immigrants about this. They work with refugees, and they've been helping their clients get their jobs back, and in the process, training some local HR departments about how to do their job when it comes to immigrant workers.
I mean, refugees come here with nothing. They've left their home country. They've left all their belongings. They've been living in a third country, sometimes up to decades, waiting to get resettled. A lot of times they're having to work under the table. They don't have much money. They don't have much savings. And then they come here, and America's not a cheap place to live. So they've got to be able to work, and even like a few weeks off of work, because they have to come to us and get an I-9 letter and get the documents together that they need to show an employer, can put significant strain on these families and their financial resources and being able to put even just like food on the table, pay their rent.
I mean, I myself was a refugee before. So when I lived in another country that I was born and raised, we refugees weren't even able to work properly at all. So now that we are here, we think that this is a freedom for us to actually live, but this is not. It's not. It's very hard. It's very difficult for these refugees. They're scared. Honestly, they're more scared now that they're here. It's worse than what they have actually experienced before.
Yeah, well, Bibi was even bringing up earlier when we were talking about how refugees right now, the fear and that the trauma that they've gone through to like leave the persecution they were facing in their home countries, even the trauma from the discrimination they felt in these third countries, and now being here, they thought, okay, I'm finally safe, and they have like no access to their rights. Refugees are getting detained unlawfully. They're not able to get their green cards. They're not able to get citizenship right now, and it's feeling worse for them than what they've all these other things that they've been through.
They don't know the place here. They don't know the language here. They don't know how to eat the food here. And the food is not even like the food that they can eat.
So at Community Center for Immigrants, you're really, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, service providers of sorts for immigrants, new arrivals, and refugees. And something that you've taken on is helping people who've lost their job. We're talking about work authorization or folks that are looking to get employment, securing their employment. Can you help me understand and walk me through, from a client's point of view, where they're getting hung up or what the hang up has been for them, what the issues they're bringing to you have been?
Well, I think a big part of it, like as Bibi was discussing, is that because HRs don't always know the different documents, you know, they're like, I want a work authorization card, I want a green card. But refugees right now can't get a new work authorization because they're not approving any application for them, and they can't get a green card. So they are also very confused by these complex systems and all the different documents they have, and they don't really know which ones they're supposed to show. There's normally a language barrier. They may not even necessarily have interpreters on site to guide them through this. So they might just be getting these warning letters in English or a warning email, and they might not even understand it. And then all of a sudden they're notified that they're suspended. And that's when they kind of come to us frantic, because there was not any good communication in their own language, not enough advocacy on the employer's part to make sure that they understand what's going on. So they're just frantic because now they're in this state of like, I can't work, I don't have any money, I need to get my job back as soon as possible. And on top of that, typically refugee resettlement providers would be helping with these kind of issues, but they've lost so much funding as well that their organizations have had to be cut back. So that's where we partner with them and also with Catholic Charities, because it's really taken a team effort between us service providers to be supporting people and saying like, hey, we've got this really helpful I-9 letter. Here's a copy that you can sort of template in your own form as well. That it's really taking all this teamwork to meet the needs.
Thinking of that teamwork, I'm thinking of when we were talking, Bibi, about how everything is so new. And I mean, just, from the language to the food, like everything, this is a whole new world. And these folks that you're representing have access to advocates or people who can kind of like help with the I-9 letters and help advocate for them. I'm curious, what happens to the folks that don't have access to your services or to the team that's in play? And what are you hearing from them? Or is it just that they lose their job and then what?
Yeah. We actually have one client who hadn't contacted me when she had lost her job, and she just thought she wasn't able to work. So her family has been suffering from a lot of like financial strain. They've moved houses a lot. They had to move back in with their parents. And then when we were talking and she told me what happened, I was like, wait, what? No, like you have this. So we actually put on back in January a big open house with the Burmese Rohingya community of Wisconsin. We did a presentation translated into both Burmese and Rohingya. And one of the biggest topics, we were just talking about the green card pause, but one of the biggest topics that came up were people didn't realize that, I can't lose my job over the fact that I don't have my green card yet and then my work authorization. And we had to really just keep hitting home with that of like, you are allowed to work, even with that being expired. It's just an extra little piece you need, but like you're allowed to work. And there's just so much confusion out there in the community.
It's incredibly difficult for HR to keep up. And depending on who you go to, whether it's HR or a client's employer, they may have a very different read of a situation because, as we were talking about, things are changing so quickly that if you're not keeping an eye on policy things and policy changes around immigration and rights and laws for refugees, things may change. And I know it's tough for a service provider to keep up. It's tough for a reporter to keep up. But what has it been like over the past year and a half to advocate for your clients, whether it's for their employers, whether it's other services that they should have? What has it been like as a service provider to kind of keep up with everything that's been changing?
It's been really tough to keep up with everything, and it's actually meant we've had to take less clients and have a wait list and have longer times before people can get in, because before refugees could get their green cards. It was finally getting caught up after the COVID backlogs, and people are getting their green cards in about 6 months. So we could just we helped almost over 900 people in 1 year in 2024. And then last year, those numbers dropped down to about 800. And this year, we'll be lucky if we hit like 500, because we really have to slow down and keep adjusting our programming to meet the current needs of what's been going on. And it just means that, again, it's just creating a larger gap in these legal services that there's going to be less providers. Providers are having to do more screening. Providers are having to do more advocacy. We're normally just doing affirmative work, meaning we're helping people get green cards, we're helping people get citizenship, but now we're having to think about defensive strategies because refugees are getting detained in Minnesota. A Rohingya man who's a refugee got killed in New York a few weeks ago, and he's blind, and ICE just left him to die on the side of the road, and that's exactly what happened to him. So it's so hard to do our jobs and to help the communities and to keep up the steam of what we had because we're constantly having to shift and adjust and protect.
Thinking about those changes to the green card expirations and green card statuses and how that's affected work authorization, how big of a problem is this today?
I think it's kind of ended up being resolved, but it took a lot of work and collaboration. Like, I know I was talking to people from different agencies, and they were like, we had to go to this employer for 2 weeks before they could finally understand and stop giving our clients such a hard time with losing their job. So it was like months long issue that we were really fighting against, or people would lose their jobs and then they weren't able to get the job back, but then they were having trouble finding a new job, and like having to do this advocacy of explaining to a new employer, like, no, don't discount them in the whole process. Or maybe they were allowed to do temporary work at these temp agencies, but then employers were scared to hire them on full time as like a regular employee. So they weren't able to get those good like healthcare benefits, PTO. There's just so much lost when you're just a temporary worker versus a full-time employer. But for right now, it's kind of started to resolve itself. And it seems like there's been a lot of advocacy, not only through our organization, but through others, that it's something we're not really hearing about so frequently anymore, which is good.
Okay. One less thing for you to worry about, maybe. It's interesting because it feels like policy is always changing. So I'm imagining as you've been able to let that go, there have been new things that have popped up that you've had been watching. So what are you watching now?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing that we're watching is refugee detention, because again, refugees, they have waited decades to come here on a visa. We hear this famous talking line of come here the right way. It's hard to find another immigrant group that like totally has come here the right way besides refugees. They've been vetted, they've been interviewed multiple times, they've run background checks on them, and then they finally get resettled here. But after a year, they have a path to a green card, but they have to apply for it again to show that they're living and they're not just going to move to a different country. And so USCIS and Trump's administration said, okay, well, at 1 year, which is when they're supposed to apply, if they don't have a green card by that 1 year date, we can detain them and re-question them and see, maybe they came here fraudulently and they are actually not refugees. And thankfully, it looks like the courts are siding against the Trump administration for that, but they detained over 100 refugees in Minneapolis, shipped them off to Texas within less than 24 hours, so they didn't even have connection to their legal representatives. And then on top of that, they took away all their identity documents. So even when they were released from ICE custody, all these like very important documents that they only have one copy of that's very difficult to get, they took, and they don't even have.
A lot of my clients are very scared of the fact that, I didn't get my green cards. What are they going to do? What if I get arrested? Who am I supposed to contact? What am I supposed to do? Like all these questions that they ask me. And sometimes we have questions. Sometimes we have answer to that. Sometimes we don't have answer to that because we don't even know how to prevent ICE, how to prevent our clients getting detained by ICE, even though they came here illegally.
That was Caitlin Lewis and Bibi Noor Mohammed from the Community Center for Immigrants in Milwaukee. I'm Jimmy Gutierrez. Status Pending is produced by WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, part of the NPR network. Music in this episode is from Blue Dot Sessions. Subscribe to Status Pending for more stories about changes in immigration playing out in Wisconsin and beyond.